100 years ago, on August 18, 1920, the United States ratified the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It read, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." It sounds reasonable enough nowadays, right? All women should obviously have the right to vote. But 100 years ago, it was not as simple as that. Women had to fight for the right to vote, also known as suffrage, over many generations. The suffragists fought against men and women who believed that women were too stupid and emotional to vote. They also fought amongst themselves, and the story of that fight explains why the passage of the 19th Amendment did not actually guarantee all American women the right to vote. Historians often point to the Women's Rights Convention held in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848 as the beginning of the American suffrage movement. The convention was organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, two abolitionists who had met at an anti-slavery conference in London. At Seneca Falls, the proposition that women should be able to vote was a controversial one, and not all women's rights advocates supported it. Women in the 1800s who did want the vote wanted it for very different reasons. Those who didn't want the vote feared it was a frightfully radical idea that would destroy the family and thereby society itself. At the end of the convention, the suffragists published a declaration of the sentiments of women based on the Declaration of Independence. It called for greater legal rights for women. It was a crucial conference, and a radical one for its time, but it was the beginning of a specific kind of women's rights movement, one that would come to put the interests of middle-class white women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony at its center. At first, these interests were aligned with the interests of abolitionists, like Frederick Douglass, who himself had escaped from slavery, was a women's rights supporter, and was the only Black participant at the Seneca Falls Convention. Before the Civil War, the fight against slavery and the fight to enfranchise women were seen as the same battle. It was about extending full citizenship to all Americans. Stanton actually compared her status as a married woman to the condition of slavery. At the time, a married woman had no rights to property, to custody of her own children, or to her paycheck if she worked. Of course, this was not the same thing as American slavery. For a few decades, though, the struggle for the rights of women and of enslaved people were seen as a common cause. Black women played an important role in both fights. The author and educator Frances Ellen Watkins Harper wrote poetry and gave stirring speeches about both causes. And Sojourner Truth, who had escaped slavery in New York, toured the country giving lectures about abolition and women's rights. As Frances Ellen Watkins Harper said in 1886, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." But the movement would not stay all bound up. It would be more than 70 years after Seneca Falls before women would win the right to vote. The women who began the movement would not live to see the day that they could cast a ballot themselves. The tensions that split the vote along racial lines affected how long it took to win the vote, and who would be left out when the amendment passed. In the next episode of The Fight, we'll talk about the split in the suffrage movement in the aftermath of the Civil War. See you then.